Good morning and welcome. As the last few of you find seats, welcome to Birmingham. Welcome to the BERA 2023 Annual Conference. As you have experienced this morning, this is our largest ever annual conference. So I'm going to start with some really quick thank yous. Zip through some slides because we want to get onto the panel. And obviously there's been one or two housekeeping things. Just before I do the thank yous, apologies for the seating thing. Everybody's got a seat now, which you've no idea how relieved I am about that. But it does mean we're a little bit late getting started. Can I thank all of you for coming? Can I thank you for submitting your abstracts way back in January? I'd like to thank those of you who volunteered to review. Please volunteer to review next year. And a thank you also to Conference and Events Committee. They make a lot of decisions, probably the year before. And finally, and she's hiding just now because she knows I don't do this, can I thank the BERA office staff, because an enormous amount of work has gone into organising this conference, and particularly to Marie and her... And we now have a Batman and Robin situation. So Dan has now joined in charge of events. So we've now got a Batman and Robin thing. If things go well, Marie has fixed it. If something isn't going well, Marie is fixing it, so please be patient with us, okay? For those of you I have not met yet, my name's Mari Beaton. My day job is at the Carnegie School of Education in Leeds Beckett, but I also have the privilege of being the chair of the BERA Conference and Events Committee. So I'm going to rattle through some slides just now, so we can get onto the panel. First of all, I'd like to thank our sponsors. Many of you will have seen them already. They're next to registration. Please go down, say hello. It's a fantastic opportunity to have a face-to-face conversation with our sponsors. I wanted to highlight particularly Elsevier. Is that how you say it? I'm never quite sure. The Wales Journal of Education. We are the BERA. I wanted to highlight the opportunity for free membership with the Research Ethics Association. Any questions about this, come and see me afterwards, but I don't want to waste time on this. I want us to get onto the panel. I did want to highlight one or two things in the programme. So we have SIG Meet and Greet. So if you're not already a member, we're hoping that you'll join. There's lots of benefits. One of them is that you can join a special interest group. These are not formal meetings, it's just a chance to meet some of our wonderful SIG conveners and make a decision about which SIGs you'd like to be part of. That's happening today. Tomorrow we have for those of you who get up early, we have the Meet the Editors of the BERA journals. Again, a great opportunity to speak face-to-face with those journal editors as you think about publishing your presentations from the conference. We have the ECR lunchtime lecture tomorrow. And then in the afternoon, we actually have some young people visiting us this time. So they will have a session in 6.27 in the afternoon, where we will have some presentations to them. They will respond, but you'll get the chance to speak to them. Education is about children after all, isn't it? So it's good to have them at conference this year. Thursday morning, I wanted to highlight a very special event. A previous president of BERA will be talking about one of his new books with Nick, our CEO. So that's happening at 11 o'clock. We have then our 3 plenary sessions. We're hoping that they're really highly topical sessions. Often there's a bit of drift off at the end of conference. I'm going to be honest about this. These are going to be really good sessions, so stay on for them, pick up your lunch, and then you can go home. So looking forward to all of those, plus your own presentations as well. And of course, this evening we have our keynote, and Linda has come all the way from New Zealand to speak to us, so it's going to be a real highlight. I also wanted to mention next year. Next year is BERA's 50th anniversary. And amongst many other ways that we're going to celebrate this, we are also going to host a joint BERA conference with a World Education Research Association focal meeting. The conference will be longer, and we'll have sort of parallel sessions all the way through the week, plus some pre-conference sessions on the Sunday, including one that will be aimed at practitioners, because we know it's really hard for practitioners to come at this point in the year. The dates, they're going to fit in with us, so your abstract submission is already open, but we will close abstract submission on the 31st of January. So it's something to really look forward to in Manchester, which BERA loves going to Manchester next year. One last thing before I tell you to enjoy the rest of the conference and introduce our panel. There was a bit of a mix-up this morning. Birmingham Aston University have asked us to use the entrance not nearest to registration, but right round the back of the building. It's because they're also doing student registration at this point. So my apologies that you're going to have to walk round to the back of the building to get in and out today. Anybody with accessibility issues, if you could speak to myself or somebody else in Conference and Events Committee or with one of the white T-shirts on, or speak to us in registration and we can walk you through the front. So just let us know. We have ways of dealing with that. So do enjoy the conference. We look forward to seeing you in Manchester next year. And now I get to hand over to our president at the moment, Professor Vivian Bamfield, who is going to lead the first panel for us. Vivian.
Okay, thank you very much. And well done for getting here. There's two ways to go around a building, the long way and the short way. I went the long way, but I got here in the end. So it's my privilege to begin this panel. As president of BERA, you get a couple of perks, one of which is that you can actually decide on what's called the President's Roundtable seminar series. And so when I became president, there was no hesitation that my focus would be on the relationship between the professions and universities, because that's what my research has been about ever since my very first major research project, which is where Rachel Lofthouse and I first met, which was looking at school-university partnerships. My work has kind of focused on teachers and teachers' professional learning, but I also work across professions. And the roundtables, the first one was held in Cardiff and focused on developments in Wales, where very interesting things are happening in relation to teachers' professional learning and teachers' education. The next one will be in November in Northern Ireland, and we'll be looking at medicine and allied health professions. And the final one will be in Exeter. Being from University of Exeter, I wanted the final one to be there. And that will pull together what we've seen across the two professions that we've focused on. My real commitment is to the importance of professional learning and professional education being located in higher education, not just because that's of benefit to professions, but perhaps increasingly more importantly, it's important for universities to be closely linked to professions, to wider society, and to be understanding learning in its practical and its theoretical aspects. So I'm going to stop talking because we want each person on the panel to have the opportunity to give their own reflections based on their experience and their research. And I've been privileged to have here people that I've known and worked with on and off over the years. I'm not going to say a whole lot. They will just say a little bit about their interest in this area, and we will work along the panel, starting with Alice Wansia from the University of Oxford. We're hoping to be disciplined enough to give you time to ask us questions, to make comments and observations, and we have 2 runners with microphones who will have quite a task looking at quite a steeply raked hold. So yes, they're going to keep fit, I think, doing that. So hopefully Mari will keep us on task and you will have time. So I'm now going to stop talking and hand over to my colleague, Alice Wansia.
Thank you very much, Vivian, and good morning, everyone. Really good to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I'll start with a quick reference to a couple of conceptual issues, and then I'll move on, if the 5 minutes allotted permit, to just referencing 2 very quick... Okay, is this any better? Okay. So I'll start with concepts, and then hopefully in the 5 minutes I've got, I'll do 2 very quick examples. So with the concepts, I want to start with an argument I made a number of years ago, which is for a notion of professional practice as consisting of 3 synergetic elements. One is the considerate exercise of virtues in and through deliberative social action. The second is the reflective and effective use of specialist and generalist tools. And the third is the systematic flexing of inquisitive thought, which I realize is a bit of a mouthful, but it could include anything from reflection in action to broader scholarship and to systematic inquiry and engagement with it. Now, this notion of practice chimes very well with another concept, which is that of professional knowledge, that would encompass at least 3 different areas of knowledge. One being responsible situated understanding, which is oriented towards virtuous action, what many people call phronesis. The second being technical knowledge, and the third being theoretical knowledge or critical reflection. So presuming a good conceptual understanding of education, as well as the ability to understand, to interpret, and to develop a critical judgment about research, education research, and about its relevance to particular situations. And as part of an older BERA initiative, the BERA RSA inquiry into teacher education, Chris Winch, Janet Orchard, and myself built on this idea of a 3-part understanding of professional knowledge in order to argue that a textured notion of professional judgment like that arises from a synergetic relationship between these, and that teacher education needs to foster all 3 in order to support teachers in their development. And this could be done through meaningful partnerships between different settings at different levels, but with a clear role in here for higher education institutions. So I'll come back to this in a second. So how might such a concept of professionalism and professional knowledge be translated in teacher education programs? And here I come to my 2 very quick examples. One is more discursive, the other one is more policy and practice based. So the first one is the work, the conclusions of the work of the USET intellectual base of teacher education initiative, which between 2019 and 2020 was chaired by Trevor Mutton and led through a lot of discussion, led to some recommendations that revolved around the idea that universities have an absolutely crucial role to play in developing teachers as professionals, and in developing teachers as professionals who are competent and confident in their recognition that education is also an intellectual endeavor, and confident and competent in their learning from research and from other sources of knowledge. Also teachers who have epistemic agency, so who are independent thinkers and who make their own epistemic choices while recognizing that knowledge may be provisional and contingent. Also, teachers who are able to engage in inquiry-rich practice, however that might be defined, and that may include, but is not reduced to, practitioner inquiries, be they individual or collaborative. And finally, professionals who are responsible, and so who act ethically and with integrity, and who recognize the social responsibilities of education, as well as the sometimes impossible task that is set in front of it. So that's the quick reference to my first example. My second example is international. And it's also an initiative that I was part of. It's the reform of teacher education for primary and lower secondary levels in Norway, which was introduced in 2017. This was and is an ambitious reform, which included a new 5-year qualification, which was an integrated master's, as well as investment in stronger research capacity across the board and very serious system reorganization. And it was based on a vision that explicitly called for greater professionalization of the teaching profession, for closer relationships between universities and schools, and for research-rich, combined with school-based experiences for student teachers. There was a 3-year international panel which was chaired by Marilyn Coker-Smith, and of which I was a part. And we are charged with providing advice and some direct support to the institutions that were grappling with implementing this wide-ranging reform across the country. So these were teacher education universities based in higher education in universities. In the final report that we produced, which was called Transforming Norwegian teacher education, we made some recommendations for different layers of the system. And they included the active agency of all participants in teacher education and in the learning process. So that included students and their representatives. It included collaborations and new patterns of collaboration and partnership that included relationships between universities, schools, and municipalities, and that aimed to support teachers in developing both practical capability and research competence, but in a synergetic and very kind of integrated fashion. We also recommended a variety of measures, some of which were implemented to provide research infrastructure, resources, communication, governance and policy tools, and a different pace of the monitoring and accountability processes connected with the reform and so on. So I'll stop here with the two examples, both of which reference very directly these conceptions that I was mentioning earlier of professionalism, professional knowledge, and a textured notion of professional practice. And I think both of which also illustrate the strong relationship that exists between such a concept of practice and knowledge, and of the role of universities alongside other settings, but the important role of universities in realizing this. So I'll close by saying that strengthening professional knowledge and the capacity for professional action is, I believe, based on all of these activities, a very, very much key contribution that higher education institutions can and should make to the world.
Thank you. My name's Rachel Lofthouse. I'm currently, and I don't have any plans to change this, Professor of Teacher Education at Leeds Beckett University. And previous to that, I worked at Newcastle University. And it's lovely when I take my glasses off, I can see current and past colleagues in the audience. When I've got my glasses on, I can't see you. We've got a screen. We can see ourselves in the screen. It's really, really off-putting. Yeah.
I'm allowed, we're colleagues, so I'm allowed to interrupt. All the time I interrupt her. I'm really aware of time, and this is such an important discussion, and Marie's going to kill me, but I'm going to make an executive decision. I don't want us to rush through this. So after this, we have because of the seating at the beginning, we were kind of late getting started. So I'm going to suggest that we run this session up to 10 o'clock, so there's time for questions. 11 o'clock, and that the first parallel session, because otherwise people are going to get anxious, we'll start at 11:15, And then we'll go 15 minutes into what we had planned for the lunch break, because we've got a whole hour. So if we make it 45, you'll still have plenty of time for lunch. Sorry, I'm going to stop now.
Very wise words. So I'm going to suggest my takeaway message first, and then you can switch off. And that is that what universities can contribute to professional learning now and in the future is the capacity to hold the space. So that's my theme, that we can and need to, in fact, we should have an obligation to hold the space. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm first of all going to start with a short account. And it's a short account of things that I relearned this weekend. So some of you will know that regularly we at BURA follow on, not deliberately, the weekend of the National Research Ed Conference. I haven't been to a National Research Ed Conference. I'm blocked by Research Ed on Twitter, so I can't follow it systematically and carefully. But inevitably, I don't mute the hashtag, which quite a lot of my colleagues suggest I should. And the reason I don't is because I am genuinely curious. And I try to be curious and open-minded about what that organisation is offering and contributing to teachers' professional learning and development. And I recognise, without doubt, a sense of community that that organisation has built up. I'm not going to spend my time telling you about the details of some of my issues with Research Ed, but I am going to reflect on my weekend of not muting the hashtag. And that will lead me into elaborating the notion of holding the space. So I noticed a few presentations and threads that evolved, and I spent a little bit of time having a look. It was too hot to sit outside, so I sat inside and had a look. I responded to a few directly. I tried to do that really politely. I've learnt that that's best. And I also posted a couple of aligned tweets, which didn't deliberately reference a specific speaker or presentation, but which I knew aligned with themes that were emerging. So inevitably, because of my interests, I was noticing things coming up around coaching, differentiation or lack of differentiation, inclusion, and an interesting little thread on mastery. I was more interested actually in how other people responded on Twitter. And I know Twitter's not the world, but it is an interesting window into part of it. What I learned through those responses, some to me and some to others, was that the notion of performance as a teacher and performativity need to continue to be questioned because they really do have a pernicious effect. That some teachers do not feel they're able to voice their concerns or contribute to practice decisions in their schools. I say some, I haven't quantified it any more than that. Some teachers are losing their love for teaching because they feel like puppets. That despite adopting the term research in the branding of Research Ed, they seem uniquely unwilling to engage with more than a few select researchers. And that the marketisation of educational spaces and the taking of territory by providers funded by the DFE, such as the newly formed National Institute of Teaching and the more established Ambition Institute, are now fully operationalised and integrated. So, if that's what one part of the education world feels and looks like, what do we do? So I think the single most important thing that we do is we hold the space. We are currently having to hold tight, and this is, for many of us, really uncomfortable. It demands hard work, and it's ridden with tension. But if we don't hold the space, we can't anticipate a positive future role for the universities in professional learning. And this goes way, way beyond teachers and teaching and education. So what do I mean by it? Holding the space. It's a phrase that's frequently used to describe the way that colleagues and I work within the research and practice community that I host, called Collective Ed. And I'm confident that many of you get similar feedback for the work that you do. It's not my term, but it is one that resonates with me. When it's used in this context, I think it has several inferences. What is the characteristic of this space that we hold? Well, it's a space in which to think, to articulate ideas, to share practice, experience dissonance, Be comfortable with dissonance. Engage with alternative perspectives. Be curious. Develop a shared language. Connect ideas and conceptual understanding and elicit feedback. It's a space which problematizes and promotes research in education as a practice, not as a fixed entity, and which uses theory as a way of developing insight, a space in which research traditions are not overlooked, while at the same time prioritizing the development of new method and methodologies. An emotionally safe space in which it is okay to ask questions and be vulnerable at all stages of professional and academic life. A space which appreciates professional learning as complex, dynamic, and non-linear, and which celebrates professional identities as fluid and intersectional. A sustained and extended space, one which persists beyond programs and silos, one that builds communities rather than cohorts, one that can be engaged with flexibility and with reciprocity. So who are we and how do we hold this space? Well, I'm very aware that many people who work fully in teacher education are working fully in teacher education with students today and not here. But as teacher educators, as researchers, as other academics in education, we obviously have responsibility for formal provision. So we can still hold the space, even when much of that formal provision is now under close scrutiny and control of the DFE. We can build relationships in that space. We can offer opportunities to new and existing professionals to extend their thinking. We can help them gain experience as well as qualifications. And those experiences and qualifications have currency and create legacy. We can use the other informal methods, and this is certainly what I find I'm able to do more now than before. Social media, creating network communities, and creating parallel organizations, bringing together parallel organizations to work together. The space we need to create might be, for some of us, a maker space. It might be a quiet space of reflection. It might be a space which crosses boundaries, exists at the borders, but it definitely needs to be a brave space. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. So I'm going to take a very different tack to Rachel. So I'm Chris Brown. I'm currently at the University of Warwick, and unlike Rachel, when I say currently, that's because I am moving somewhere else in a few weeks. So my interests kind of to date, and I guess one of the reasons I've been selected for this panel have been in areas such as evidence-informed practice for teachers, connecting or creating that bridge between teaching and research. Thinking about kind of going beyond that, what networks of teachers look like. So building on what Rachel just said about those kind of networked learning communities, but thinking even further than that and working with both Graham and some colleagues in the audience on if we go beyond kind of education, if we go beyond teachers, what does an ideas-informed society look like? What does it look like if we're all engaging with knowledge and using ideas to improve our kind of day-to-day life? So that's my current kind of working sphere. But in terms of answering those questions, what is it that universities can and should and maybe need to be doing in the future? One of the things I touch on first of all is this idea of soft skills. So very different, taking a very different track from both Rachel and Alice. So myself and my colleague Ruth, who's sitting in the audience there, have been working on a project, an EU Horizon-funded project called Megaskills, which is about looking at can video games train transversal skills, can train soft skills in young people, not just young people, we're looking at young people. And can we actually start to think about ways in which we can collect data from video games that people have been playing and award micro-credentials? Now, we've done that in a number of ways. We've started to do, we've completed a systematic review on looking at what kind of skills are needed, what employability skills are needed for the 21st century, what is it employers are saying, what is it the economy wants, for the 21st century? And what does that look like? And then taking those findings and running Delphi panels with businesses, business people across Europe to say, actually, which of these really, really matter to you? And what's interesting is when we think of universities, we think of knowledge, but when we kind of talk about this idea of soft skills, things like teamwork, things like adaptability, things like problem solving, things like communication, are seen by employers as important as, if not more important than knowledge. So if we think about many of us, what was our first degree in? Did we use a lot of that stuff when we went into the world of work? Sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. I did an economics degree, and I don't often draw on that kind of economic knowledge. But what I do draw on is some of the kind of frameworks, some of the skills, some of the ways of thinking that taught me. And what I think we need to do as universities is to think about, can we help develop those soft skills that we are helping our students leave, whatever discipline they're in, but leave the university with the skills they need to flourish, with the skills they need to thrive in the working world. And we've got a mandate to ensure that when our students leave, they can progress into graduate-ready careers. So maybe some of the things we need to do is rethink about what we're doing in our lectures, what we're doing when we work with our students, to think about how we help build that skill base, how we help develop what we're doing. What is it our seminars can do? What is it we can use our impact acceleration account money to achieve? What is it we can use our Hive money to actually help work with our students so they engage in problem-based learning, collaborative engagement, and so on and so forth. So that would be one of the first things I was thinking about. But thinking about some of the stuff we do but could do even better. And again, touching on what Rachel was talking about, like all of us, I'm kind of interested in OpenAI, I'm interested in artificial intelligence, but perhaps not for some of the reasons we often think about. We're thinking about whether our students are gaming the system, whether they're doing the work we want them to, how do we rethink OpenAI in the modern society, or how we engage our students with it. But for me, I'm worried it's the death of evidence-informed practice. With OpenAI, what do teachers or anybody else need researchers for? If I'm a teacher, surely I can just ask ChatGPT or whatever it might be to give me a research-informed lesson plan, to tell me what I need to be doing for those kids that for whatever reason, my teaching isn't quite reaching or working for. So if that's the situation, and maybe it doesn't quite work with the current models of ChatGPT, which are built on kind of older databases, but moving forward, why wouldn't that be the case? Why wouldn't it be the situation that teachers can completely bypass the university and go straight to OpenAI to get the answers they want? And if that does happen, where does that leave us as universities? Where does it leave us in terms of what we help teachers do? And I think that's also tied to another kind of area that, okay, maybe not now, but in the future is kind of coming forward, which is ultimately, where do people get their knowledge from? Now, if you kind of go far-fetched into the future, there are people in California that are genuinely considering how to implant technology into their bodies so that they can start to make themselves better. And if you listen to people like Elon Musk, they're talking about, how might we download knowledge into our brains? So again, this kind of rules out the university as the imparter of knowledge. But where it does leave us is to start to think about, what does it mean to be a critical, collaborative consumer of knowledge? What does it mean to be able to understand how to use knowledge ethically, how to understand what knowledge is right, how to turn that knowledge into a powerful tool that we can do something better with, that we can make society better with, that we can help people become more happy, healthy, live in flourishing ways, work together as neighbors, build social capital, and so on. So what I'm concerned about is how we transform, not what knowledge we impart, but how we help people use that better. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm Graham Hanscom. I'm a sort of aged alter ego to Chris, a sort of a Hyde to his Jekyll, or perhaps not. We worked together on a number of things. And I struck the aged note because I guess mine is going to be a rather personal reflection of a career spent in schools, managing schools and local authority management, and working with one foot always in universities with a real affection. So it's going to be a rather personal reflection and concern about the contribution of universities to professional learning, drawing on experience of how this has been actually a continuing issue for as long as I can remember, over decades. And what has tended to characterize the whole journey for me is ill thought through and often crude and unjust undermining of the important contribution of universities. In a large literature review into school-university partnerships that I did a few years ago, along with my colleague Ching Gu, who was then at Nottingham University, is now at UCL, and Matt Varley, who's at Nottingham Trent, we identified that potential partnership contribution of universities involved really a wide spectrum of activity, focusing on initial teacher training, continuing professional learning, consultancy and collaborative research, as well as various other things as well about access. And if we take, for instance, initial teacher training, of course, to begin with, there's been immense shifts and challenges in the role of universities from in prehistory, when I was trained as a teacher in the 1970s via typically a 3-year program at a teacher training college endorsed by a local university with occasional bouts of teaching practice in schools, to, I see some recognition from some people here, to the late 1980s and early 1990s, where the balance shifted towards increased training time spent in schools rather than academic preparation in what some very unfairly, I felt, perceived as the confines of the ivory towers of HE. This led to many flourishing school university ITT programs. I remember managing from a school, one that flourished with Cambridge University at the time, and eventually to establishing things like school-centred initial teacher training programs. And I recall actually establishing probably the first SCIT in the country, first as a local authority one and then became independent. And again, I recall the heyday of university involvement in school professional development, being part of then the DFEE panel for assessing major submissions from HE and training institutions for in-service training contracts. Then government policy in the early 2000s emphasized that the most effective professional learning was learning from each other, from what works within and between schools, school-based, school-led, and controlled CPD, focused on the classroom. And of course, that was very much supported by much evidence, including that then a teacher training agency. But actually, the teacher training agency at the time made a really important point, and they warned that the dangers of schools simply becoming insular in their professional learning approaches, and actually the importance of a blend of school-led with the zest of external contribution, including the vital contribution and partnership of universities. Similar shifts and trends can be identified in the area of research and inquiry and growing the knowledge base, and I'm happy to explore more about that maybe in question and answer. The concern, though, in all these areas is that by rightly recognizing the importance of school autonomy, the development of the concept of the self-improving school system, and school control in professional learning, this has helped shape, for me, an environment which has increasingly marginalized the important contribution of universities. The secret for me is forging strong, regularly evaluated and reinvigorated school-university partnerships. These, of course, themselves, though, present a number of major challenges in terms of working across respective school and university cultures, issues of power and control, developing an ethos of mutuality and of shared leadership. And actually, I think the concept of a third space, I very much echo what Rachel was saying, but I would see the importance of creating a third space, distinct actually from the cultures of each partnering organisation, but investing in genuine school-university partnerships is clearly, for me, the way forward.
So unfortunately, Morag Redford couldn't be with us, and she was going to represent Scotland. So last night, Vivian asked me, could I say a few words from a Scottish perspective? Because although I work in Leeds Beckett, the majority of my career I've worked in Scotland. So these are not well-prepared thoughts, like my esteemed colleagues here. But after she asked me last night, I went home and I thought, I'm almost being asked to justify why we all work in universities, those of us here who work in universities. Because I think through my entire, very long now, because I'm quite aged, career, I've always felt that tension from different angles about, well, can't the profession of teaching, isn't it just about learning the skills of teaching children and young people? And I thought, I don't agree with that. The university, and that's why I work in a university, has a very distinct role to play to prepare the teaching workforce. And I thought, and I am still more aware of the Scottish situation than I am of the English situation. And it's not perfect in Scotland. But I think there are certain historical factors that help us in Scotland. One is our attitude towards university provision. Many of you will have read about the idea of the Lada Peerts, this notion right back from the 15th century, where we believed that anybody could go to university, and that one of the teachers' roles was to identify those that would benefit from it. But also the fact that our senior students have a much wider curriculum. They do 5 or 6 hires rather than 3 A-levels. So they have a much broader curriculum as they're nearing the end of secondary. And honestly, I'm going somewhere. And then once they get into university, to their, if they're Scottish students, still free undergraduate, there's rules in some of the universities where you're not allowed to focus just on your chosen topic. So my previous institution in Aberdeen, in first and second year, and it's a 4-year course, or 5 with dentistry and medicine. In first and second year, no matter whether you're going for a maths degree, or you're going to become a doctor, or you're going to become a teacher, one of your 3 subjects has to be outside your area. So when I would run a first-year course looking at theoretical understanding of childhood, I would have teachers in there, but I would also have doctors, and I would have engineers, and I would have dentists. Really rich conversation. Some of them hated it, especially the mathematicians for some reason. I have no idea why. But what I'm trying to say is, if we only teach skills, if we go down that technicist, everybody trains in a school route, then we only teach skills and abilities. And what I think the university brings is, it brings an opportunity for teachers while they are training to develop as individuals. Because yes, they need knowledge and understanding, but they also need to develop a values and attitudes system. That's something the GTCS in Scotland actually get us to assess before they leave. And that's for all the professions, the doctors that I worked with, the dentists, and the teachers. And those values and attitudes might not seem apparent in their first year when they're doing their induction year. But if you think about our students that finished in 2018, did we know that they were going to have to deal with the professional challenges of COVID and the pandemic and working from home? Many, many refugees coming from Ukraine, and we're still getting them from Afghanistan and Syria. And now the cost of living crisis. It's not just about the skills. And almost creating Renaissance men and women who have a broad understanding of the world, who have developed a deeper understanding of the values that bring them into teaching, That's what the university, I think, can provide. So I think we should still dance with universities. So, I think we have time for two, and I'm going to call you on it, two really brief conversations. So if you'd like to put your hand up, the runners will go. And as they run, this session we are hoping is going to act as a provocation. So please do talk to the panelists during the next couple of days and talk amongst yourselves about this really important topic. But we have a question at the front there.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's Chuck Whitehead. The last time I wore a suit at the Beer Conference, I was giving the Beer presidential address. The reason today is that I go to the University of Worcester after this to collect my D.Lit. And it's focused on what we're actually talking about today, which is that relationship between the professions and the university. Because I was...
really quick, because I'm going to try and get another question in.
Okay, the question is to all the members of the panel, that what I can't quite understand, given that you've all been so active and professionally responsible, why is it that none of you, from what I could hear, had actually researched your own educational knowledge, the knowledge embodied in your own educational practices, and that you'd use to explain your educational influences in the learning of your students and others? Because it seems to me, unless you do that, we're not going to do what Shern said, and that is to create a new epistemology for the new scholarship. Okay, thank you.
Anyone like to take that one first? Because I think it was general.
What makes you think we haven't?
And another question? Oh, one down here. Oh, could you wait for the microphone?
Thank you. You talked about COVID and how it's affecting professionals. You talked about AI, but I think there's another pressure that universities have been dealing with in the UK through the internationalization of the student body, which is really divorcing the relationship between the university and the professionals, the professional product it's releasing into the world. And I think the pressures that we have in terms of economy, in terms of what we're expected to do, is making that also a bit of a difficult conversation, in addition to the fact that not only is the product removed, we ourselves are being a bit more removed from universities because of universities realizing that, after COVID, you could work from home, it's cheaper for them if we work from home, and so on. So I think this increasing divorce between the professionals at university and the professionals they're working with is an issue that's worth thinking about.
Thank you. Would anyone like to briefly respond?
Just to say it's a very good point, and it is something that I think certainly I can see how that those pressures are affecting what we're looking at and driving a wedge. Yeah, certainly. Particularly because with the professions, the professional standards are very much national-based rather than international. I know at Exeter they've tried to develop an international program in psychology, but that's proving quite difficult because of moving into professions in different nations is quite hard. Yeah, thank you.
We're going to stop there. Sorry if you didn't get your question asked. Please do continue to discuss this. Have a wonderful conference, and we'll move on to the parallel sessions now. Can you please put your hands together for the panel?